now it's time for Fleck's Facts. Dr. Fleck, what are you going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about, with this trend of people moving from different parts of the country to another part of the country, mostly moving from the Northeast to the South, like to Texas, Florida,
right,
North Carolina,
and that's
Tennessee.
Really precipitated by the fact that with COVID, a lot of people are working from home now. You don't necessarily have to live where you work, right?
Absolutely, you don't have to live where you work. But the interesting thing is that I'm getting calls every day with new clients that come in that have just moved here with disease maladies that they haven't experienced before. And it's because, and let's think about it, probably up in Manhattan today, it's 10 degrees. And here in
with snow on the ground.
With snow on the ground. Mm-hmm. Here in Bradenton, Sarasota, it's 70 degrees. 65, 70 degrees, really cold,
but
cold 65.
Yeah.
Terrible for us. But they come in and all of a sudden they're coming because they have skin issues. Skin issues, of course, is the number one issue of all pets medically that they'll experience. Number one.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily experience that in the northern part of the United States, except maybe more so during the spring, summer, or fall.
Sure.
And it's minimally
when
there.
you can have allergies, for example.
But why? That's exactly right. And that's what we have more down here. So consequently, as they move from the north to the south, and they just don't understand why their pet is scratching so much. Why is it licking its paws? Why is it just keeping them up at night that they hadn't ever done that where they came from up north?
So number one, so one of the things that I guess you're saying is that before you move to a new environment, you really have to check it out and find out what particular problems could exist in this environment. And I mean, I'm going to use myself as an example. Okay. And then I'll talk about the dogs. So for me, I never had contact allergies before. So now I have contact allergies. I could touch a doorknob and my hand burns.
That's good. I'm glad you're explaining what that is. Contact means touching something.
Right. So touching something. And a lot of that has to do with, for example, the weather here. It's so hot and humid that a lot of bacteria doesn't die because it is hot and humid, right?
And a lot of debris is in the air.
Right. A lot of debris is in the air. And then I didn't know this until you and I talked about this. You made me totally aware of this. They do a lot of the flea and tick testing on products here. Especially.
All of it is done here in Florida.
It's done here in Florida because we have such a big problem with ticks and fleas. I'm sorry, not so much ticks, but fleas, right?
Yes. Well, we have problems with ticks down here too in certain parts of the state. And it's really important because what may have worked in Massachusetts may not be as effective here in Florida. So one of the first things you should probably do is, you're trying to learn all the new ambiance of where you're moving to. Why not make an appointment with your veterinarian to find out,
or your new veterinarian,
with your new veterinarian in where you've moved,
right?
And find out about the climate, what it is that's necessary that might be different than to care for your pet, with preventative care in particular here versus where you came from.
Sure.
So lots of times we find that many of the fleas, for example, that are existing in New York, or Wisconsin, or Michigan, haven't really changed that much in their species. But here in Florida, they did change a lot.
Sure.
And products that were used very effectively 10 and 15 years ago,
right,
that are still effective there,
right,
may not be as effective here. So that's the first thing you got to think about is parasites. And don't forget this too. They got plenty of snow on the ground, like you're saying. They got plenty of ice, etc. So that really kills a lot of in the ground, any of the parasites that might be in the ground. But down here, they don't die. Lots of times they can have parasites like roundworms and hookworms that normally don't affect adult dogs up there. But we know that some of the
at different times of the year, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But down here, they've done testing to show that that maybe 6 to 8% of all the canines have roundworms and or hookworms.
Yeah.
Here.
And we just talked about that a few months ago, if you can recall, and how the medication is just, it's harder to control that. And like you said, medication up north might not necessarily work in the south. The other thing I can think of, considering we live, where we are now, the studio is probably 3 miles from the beach. Sandflies is a problem here.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I went fishing, took the dog, and the dog and I were both fighting the sandflies just on the beach while we were doing some wade fishing. So, I mean, that was another thing. I was like slapping my leg constantly. And I said, okay, this isn't a good spot. I need to go. I need to go somewhere else.
So parasites for both the skin and the GI tract
Sure.
can be different if you're moving from a cold weather state to a warm weather
Sure.
state like Florida. The second thing that is really important for people to recognize, and they don't understand how the behavior of their pet, how its energy is maybe depleted some. But coming here to Florida, for example, is hot.
Sure.
And it's humid.
Exactly.
And we have a lot, as we talk about, a lot in the air. I always encourage everybody to get an air purifier.
Okay.
That's not only good for the pet, but it's good for them also.
Sure.
The second thing is that you got to understand that, and I'm going to ask you to talk about this because you're a dog walker all the time. When do you walk your dogs in Florida?
I walk my dogs as early in the morning as possible. I do not. I mean, now that it's cool, cool, it's like 70 degrees.
Freezing for
freezing
us.
for
Yes,
us.
yes.
It's 60 and 70 degrees. I walk them during the day, around noon or 1 o'clock because it's still cool out. It's getting warmer. So, I mean, what I wear at 5 o'clock in the morning is not, I wear Uggs at 5 o'clock in the morning when I walk because my feet are cold and I usually wear a coat. Now, maybe when I walk my dogs at noon, I'll just have a sweater on. And I generally walk them again after, dinner in the early evening between 6:30 and 7. But here's the thing, in the summertime, I don't walk my dogs at midday. It is too hot. And I discourage
And too humid.
And I discourage people from doing it because a lot of times I will see little, people probably move down here or older people walking their dog. It's too hot for them. If it's too hot for them and too humid for them, it's way too humid for your dog, especially since the dog's on the ground and getting that heat from the ground.
Absolutely. Wonderful thing to say. Yeah.
Getting that thing. And the other thing is, if you're living near the water, for example, your dog can swim, all the time, but you got to rinse them off. We're not used to that. I mean, there are all sorts of things that you have to take into consideration.
Take into consideration this too, that as you move south, that there are a lot sunnier days.
Sure.
And being much more sunny, we forget that
care.
We forget, particularly with that intensive sun, that they can get sunburn. And of course, sunburn, just like in people, leads to skin cancer. So you want to make sure that if you're spending time outside with your pet, that you've got to take into consideration for sun protection and sunscreen.
Sure. And I think those things are really, but the other thing is, one of the things that you don't have, and they're great things about, especially moving in the South. I mean, especially where we are, there's lots of trails you can walk in. There's a lot more time. You can do more things outside
with your pet
that you might not, recognize. So, these are all important things. And I think you touched upon it, and I'm going to kind of wrap it up with that. When you're thinking about moving from one city to another, go online and look at what's available in that city. Ask your veterinarian if there are environmental concerns that you have to be aware of. Maybe he has a recommendation for you. Go online, go on blogs, look for influencers online, learn more about those dog-friendly cities so that you can know what kind of environment. Another environment that's here is you really can't leave your dogs out and about at night because there are coyotes here. Right. I mean, you don't think about there are coyotes here. And it's funny, like where we live,
predators, period.
Right. There are predators here. There are more bees than you can imagine here, depending on if your neighbors have flowers. So those are other considerations. There are different types of snakes here. So these are all things that you have to be aware
There's
of.
different kinds of alligators here.
They're alligators.
If you're by the water?
If you're by a golf course, we always see
gosh.
these water, these bodies of water, and you're walking by a body of water, an alligator or a panther. can come up, like if you're living down like in the Naples area. So, but then again, there are mountain lions. I mean, how many people in California have lost their dogs in the woods and then were afraid that a mountain lion got their dog?
So I guess what we're saying is that we're usually excited when we're moving. Some
Right.
people get depressed when they move, but most people are excited about moving to a new venture. So you prepare yourself, and when you arrive, you have to make some adjustments. That same thing has to happen for your pet.
Yeah. I think that that's and it's such an opportune topic, Dr. Fleck, because so many people, if they didn't move early in the pandemic or mid-pandemic to get out of the big cities they are changing their way of life.
I'm meeting so many people that are moving here from New York, from Chicago, from New Jersey.
Mhm.
They're here.
Thanks for viewing our content on Pet Buzz Plus.